They chose my brother's dream wedding over my college fund, left me with nothing but empty promises. But what they didn't know? I didn't need their money or approval to make my dreams come true. Watch how I turned betrayal into my biggest victory, proving that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most unexpected triumphs. The dinner table was set for four, but the tension in the room could have suffocated an army. The clinking of silverware and the soft hum of the overhead lights were the only sounds filling the silence. I pushed my vegetables around my plate, taking an occasional bite, but not really tasting anything. My father was quiet on one side, his usual place at the head of the table. My mother sat opposite him, eyes darting between my brother Ethan and me, like she was calculating the next move in a game she was certain to win. Ethan, oblivious as always, was chattering about his upcoming wedding plans with all the excitement of a child opening presents on Christmas morning. I had stopped listening a few minutes ago. But then, without warning, my mother's voice sliced through the air, sharp and measured. "We've decided to use the funds from your college fund for the wedding." The words hung in the air, like an invisible weight pressing down on my chest. I froze, the fork halfway to my mouth. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to speak. "Excuse me," I asked, my voice a little too sharp, a little too desperate for a response that wasn't what I was hearing. "You heard me," my mother said, not looking up from her plate. "We've already put aside money for Ethan's wedding, and now we're taking the rest from your college fund." I blinked, trying to process. "You're serious?" My voice faltered, but I couldn't help it. My world was collapsing in real time. "We need the money for Ethan's dream wedding. It's an investment, and we've discussed it. It's what's best for the family," she said, as if this was the most logical thing in the world. "What do you mean best for the family?" I asked, my throat tightening. I hadn't realized how much I was holding back until the words left my mouth. "You promised that money would be there for me to go to college, Mom. For years, you promised." Ethan's smile faltered for just a second, but it quickly returned. He had always been the golden child, the one who never had to ask for anything. I had always known he was their priority, but this was a punch to the gut. "You're going to college, aren't you?" My father spoke up, finally looking at me with that patronizing look he always wore when he thought I was being dramatic. "It's not like you can't still go. This is a one-time thing, Maya. Ethan needs this wedding. It's not like we're asking you to give up your future. We just need a little help." I felt my face flush with anger, but I held my ground. "You need help? You're taking money from my future, from my dreams, and you think that's okay? This is a huge deal to me." I didn't care that I was shouting now. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands shaking. I couldn't believe this was happening. For years, they had pushed me to be the responsible one, to keep everything running smoothly, to follow the rules. And now they were telling me that their son's wedding was more important than my future. "We've been planning this wedding for months," my mother said, her voice soft but firm. "Ethan deserves this. He's worked hard for it, and you can't possibly expect us to ignore his needs for your college fund." It felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling away. The reality of what they were saying was too much to process. I had worked so hard in high school, earned scholarships, spent countless hours studying, and now this. My dreams were being tossed aside like they didn't matter. I looked at Ethan, expecting him to show some sign of guilt, but all he did was sip his water, unaffected. His eyes were focused on his phone, as if this was just another boring conversation he was obliged to listen to. I had never felt more invisible. "This is unfair," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I've worked for this. I've done everything you've asked me to do, and now you're telling me I don't matter? That my future doesn't matter?" "We're not saying that, Maya," my father said, his voice growing softer, trying to placate me. "But we need to make sacrifices sometimes. You'll still go to college. We're not taking everything from you. You'll figure it out. This wedding is a big deal, and the family needs to pull together." I couldn't speak. I wanted to scream, but instead I pushed my chair back and stood up. I needed air. I needed to get away from this, from their cold logic, from the betrayal. I had worked for years to build something for myself, and they were just going to rip it away without a second thought. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly, turning to leave. You have no idea what this means to me. Maya. My mother called after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I walked out of the house, leaving behind the people I had always called family, the ones who had promised me a future and now seemed to care only about the wedding of the son who didn't need it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to prove them wrong. I was going to figure out how to pay for college on my own, and I would show them that my future was worth fighting for. And when I got that scholarship, when I walked across that stage, I'd remember this moment. I'd remember who had chosen what, and I would be the one standing tall, not them. This section introduces the emotional catalyst for Maya's journey, setting up the internal and external conflicts of family dynamics, financial priorities, and personal ambition. It explores Maya's shock, hurt, and resolve in the face of her family's choices, setting the stage for her growth and determination to achieve her dreams. The next few weeks felt like a blur of frustration, disappointment, and a relentless pursuit of something I wasn't sure I could even grasp. My parents had made their decision, and now I had to make mine. I had already known that Ethan had always been the golden child, but the reality of their favoritism had never hit me quite as hard as it did when they literally chose his wedding over my future. I'd spent the first few days after the dinner in a state of shock, unable to really grasp how my parents could make such a callous decision. But then the anger kicked in. It was a quiet kind of anger, simmering under the surface, fueling every step I took. I didn't know how I was going to get out of this mess, but I was determined to find a way. I sat at my small desk in my bedroom, papers and brochures scattered across the surface. The scholarship applications I had been holding off on, because I assumed my parents would take care of the rest of my college expenses, were now my only option. The weight of each form felt heavier than the last, the realization sinking in that no matter what, I was on my own. I had always been a good student, never the star athlete or the prom queen, but I had always prided myself on my grades. That's what my parents had always wanted me to focus on, school. But now even that wasn't enough. My best efforts, my sacrifices, none of it seemed to matter to them. They had made their choice. And now I had to make mine. I found myself staring at the screen of my laptop late one night, a scholarship application open in front of me. The university I dreamed of attending, the university, was offering a merit-based scholarship for students from challenging backgrounds. I fit every category they described: hardworking, determined, and willing to go above and beyond to achieve my goals. My heart raced as I clicked Submit. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. What if I didn't get the scholarship? What if I wasn't good enough? The weight of my family's rejection hung heavy in my mind, making every step forward feel like a battle. But I pushed the doubts aside. I had no other choice. The next morning, I started working at a local coffee shop to save whatever money I could. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. I didn't mind the long shifts. The physical exhaustion helped keep my mind occupied. I'd work until closing, then spend my late nights filling out more scholarship applications, researching grants, or looking for other ways to pay for my tuition. I barely had time to sleep, but I didn't care. Every moment was a step closer to something better. Ethan, of course, was completely unaware of what I was going through. His wedding plans continued without a hitch, and my parents, well, they never once mentioned the situation again. It was as if they had erased my entire future from the conversation. I wasn't sure if it was deliberate or if they were genuinely so consumed by the wedding that they didn't even see me anymore. Either way, it didn't matter. I couldn't keep waiting for them to see me. I had to see myself. I had to prove them wrong. The weeks went on, and slowly the exhaustion began to wear me down. I felt the weight of every dollar I earned and every application I submitted. I couldn't even talk to my parents about it. They were too wrapped up in wedding preparations. My mom sent me a quick text about helping with a bridal shower, and I ignored it. What could I say? I wasn't going to support a wedding that had cost me everything. One evening, after a particularly long shift at the coffee shop, I got home to find a message on my phone. It was from the scholarship committee of the university I had applied to. My heart stopped as I opened the email. Dear Maya, congratulations. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the prestigious Academic Excellence Scholarship at our university. This scholarship will fully cover your tuition and fees for the next 4 years. We look forward to welcoming you to our community. I stared at the screen, unable to process the words. This was it. This was the moment I had been working toward. The scholarship that would change everything. The scholarship that would let me escape, that would prove to my family and to myself that I was worth something, that I didn't need their approval to succeed. Tears welled up in my eyes as I read the email again. I couldn't believe it. After everything, the rejection, the betrayal, the hurt, I had done it. I had gotten into my dream school, and now I could go without worrying about tuition. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had something that was truly mine. But even as the joy of my success washed over me, the bitter taste of my family's neglect remained. I couldn't ignore the reality that I had achieved this alone. My parents hadn't been there when I needed them. They hadn't supported my education. They hadn't cared enough to help me until now. And now that I had succeeded on my own, they were going to have to accept that I didn't need them in the way they had thought. The next morning, I sat in my room, the scholarship letter in my hands, knowing I had to tell my parents. As much as I had achieved on my own, I couldn't ignore the fact that they needed to know what I had done, but I wasn't sure how to tell them. Would they even care? Would they acknowledge my achievement, or would they dismiss it as something I had done out of spite? I took a deep breath and picked up the phone, dialing my mother's number. She answered after the second ring, her voice light, as if everything were fine. "Hi, Maya. How's everything? How's work? Ethan's wedding is in full swing, and we're all getting excited about the big day." I paused, biting my lip before finally speaking. "Mom," I said, my voice steady, "I got the scholarship. The one for my tuition. It's fully funded. I'm going to college." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, but nothing else. Finally, she spoke. That's great, Maya. Really, we're happy for you." Her words felt hollow, distant, as if she was reading from a script. The excitement I had expected from her wasn't there, but it didn't matter. I had done it, and nothing could take that away from me. "I'm not asking for your approval, Mom," I said, my voice softer now but firm. "But this is my success. I earned it on my own. I hope you understand that." She didn't respond right away, but when she did, her voice was quieter. "I understand, Maya. I really do, and I'm proud of you. I just didn't know how much this meant to you. We've been so focused on Ethan's wedding." "I know," I said, the bitterness still lingering in my throat. "But I didn't need you to focus on me. I just needed you to trust me, to let me take care of myself." And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly standing on my own. The scholarship, my achievement, was mine, and nothing could take that away. The days after I received the scholarship felt like a whirlwind. I was walking on air, yet there was a weight at the back of my mind that I couldn't shake. My parents had acknowledged my success, but I could tell it wasn't in the way I had hoped. There was no celebration, no pride, just a strained, almost apologetic tone from my mother. But I had done it. I had fought for my future, and I had won, alone. I didn't let it bother me at first. I was too focused on the logistics of preparing for college. I'd spent the next week sorting out housing applications, picking out dorm essentials, and getting everything in order for my new life. This scholarship had changed everything for me. It was the key to freedom, the ticket to escape the small town and the family that had never really understood me. But there was a part of me, a stubborn part, that kept wondering if this was enough. Sure, I'd gotten into my dream school. I'd secured the funding to attend. But what about the people I had left behind? The ones who should have been proud of me? The ones who didn't care until I proved them wrong? I had a lot of time to think about that while I was working shifts at the coffee shop, trying to save up some spending money for college. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but it kept me distracted. I could focus on the grind, focus on making enough to live on, and not think about my parents' indifference. I had learned long ago that no amount of complaining would change their behavior. So I did what I always did. I focused on the things I could control. But then came the call. It was one of those rare moments when I had a break at work, sitting alone at a table, scrolling through my phone. My mom's name appeared on the screen, and for a split second I thought about ignoring it. After all, what was there to say? She wasn't going to change her mind about the wedding, about how they had put my future aside, but I picked it up anyway. "Hey, Maya," she said, her voice warmer than the last time we'd spoken. I was thinking about you and wanted to check in. How are things going with the scholarship? I know it's a big step. I leaned back in my chair, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. It's going great, Mom. I've got everything lined up. The scholarship covers tuition, housing, everything. I'm all set. There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. I'm glad, really. I know we didn't get off on the right foot with this whole thing, but I'm proud of you. You did it on your own, and that takes a lot of courage. I blinked, the words sinking in. This was the first time I had heard her say anything like that. Thanks, Mom, I said, swallowing the lump that had suddenly formed in my throat. I appreciate it. She sighed softly. I'm sorry, Maya. I should have been more supportive. I should have done more to make sure you felt valued. But I see now that you didn't need us. You've always been strong enough on your own. I didn't know how to respond. I had spent so long fighting against her and my father's expectations that part of me wanted to tell her I didn't need her approval. But the truth was, I did. I had fought so hard to prove myself, but now that I was on the other side, I realized something. The validation I had been seeking wasn't about their acknowledgement. It was about me realizing that I was enough without their support. I guess I just had to prove it to myself, I said, my voice steady. It wasn't about you or Ethan or anyone else. It was about me finding out if I could do it. And I did. She didn't say anything at first, and I was about to hang up when she spoke again. You did, Maya. You really did, and I'm sorry for not seeing that sooner. I'll make it up to you somehow. I wanted to believe her, but there was a part of me that knew things wouldn't suddenly change. Our relationship had been built on expectations, on disappointment, and on me fighting for a place in a family that had often made me feel invisible. But maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something different. Maybe this was the first step toward a real relationship, one where I didn't have to prove myself anymore. As the weeks passed, I focused more on preparing for college than on the lingering tension with my parents. I couldn't afford to waste time on their mixed messages. I had bigger dreams now, and I had learned the hard way that my future was my responsibility, not theirs. The day I left for college was bittersweet. I said goodbye to the small town, to the coffee shop, to everything that had held me back, and I packed my bags with the determination of someone who had finally freed themselves from the weight of family expectations. My parents said they were proud of me, though I could tell the words still felt strange for them. I don't think they fully understood the magnitude of what I had done. They hadn't seen the blood, sweat, and tears it had taken for me to get here. But it didn't matter. I was going to build a future for myself, with or without their approval. And as I drove away from home, leaving everything I knew behind, I felt a rush of freedom. College was everything I had dreamed of, and more. I threw myself into my studies, focusing on what had always mattered most to me. The scholarship I had earned allowed me to focus on what really mattered: my education. For the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The world was open to me, and I wasn't going to let anything hold me back. In my second semester, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my parents, a handwritten note that was unexpected and unusual for them. I opened it carefully, wondering what it might say. Dear Maya, we've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. We know we've made mistakes, and we want to start over. We're proud of you. You've done something we didn't think was possible, and we see now that you've made it on your own terms. We'll always be here for you, no matter what. The letter wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. And that was enough. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't fix everything. But it was a start. It meant that maybe, after everything we had been through, we could finally move forward. I didn't need their approval to succeed, but knowing that they were proud of me, genuinely proud, was something I never expected. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need to fight anymore. My future was mine, and I had built it on my own. And that was enough. The months rolled by quickly, as they tend to do when you're building the life you've always dreamed of. I was living in my college dorm, surrounded by new friends, a world of new opportunities, and the steady hum of my academic and personal growth. The scholarship had opened so many doors for me, and I wasn't about to waste it. But there was still the underlying tension with my parents. They hadn't mentioned the wedding or the money issue since that phone call, but their absence was always there in the background. Their attempts to reach out, however rare, felt like small, hesitant gestures, but none of it changed the fact that we were miles apart, emotionally and physically. Even with the new space and freedom, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still carrying the burden of their expectations, of their disappointment, despite everything I had accomplished. I had built this new life on my own, but their voices were still there, whispering in the back of my mind, wondering if I was truly making the right choices or if I was just trying to prove something. I didn't expect them to change overnight, and maybe part of me didn't want them to. After all, the girl who had fought to be seen wasn't about to lose herself in the process of reconciliation. I was going to continue carving my path, regardless of how they felt about it. But at the same time, I knew it was time to let go of the bitterness that had clouded my relationship with them. That was the only way I could truly move forward. One evening, I received another letter from my parents. It had been a while since the last one, and something about it felt different. This time there was no formal tone. It was just a letter, written in a way that felt almost personal, like they were speaking to me as me rather than their daughter. My mother had written it, and her words seemed carefully chosen, as though she had been thinking about them for a long time. Dear Maya, we've been watching you from afar, and we've realized that we've made mistakes we can't take back. We've always been so wrapped up in what we thought was best for you and for Ethan that we never gave you the chance to just be yourself. We didn't support you the way we should have. We didn't listen when you needed us to hear you. And we let our own fears and insecurities affect your future. We're sorry, Maya. We love you and we are proud of you. No matter what, we'll always be here for you on your terms. I read the letter twice, unsure of what to make of it. There was a sincerity there that I hadn't expected. A change, perhaps, or maybe it was just the natural progression of time. I had no idea what this meant for us moving forward, but it was a step toward something new. It wasn't an apology in the way I had imagined it, a grand gesture of remorse and regret, but it was honest, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Was it enough? Could I just let go of everything I had held onto for so long? Could I forgive them, or at least allow them back into my life on their terms instead of my own? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I couldn't keep holding on to the past forever. In the weeks that followed, I responded to the letter. My reply wasn't long or complicated. I simply thanked them for their honesty, for acknowledging the distance between us. I told them I'd forgiven them, not because they asked for it, but because I needed to. And that, for me, was the first real step toward healing. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to live with it and moving forward. I didn't know what would come next for us. Maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter. Maybe it wasn't. But I had learned that I couldn't control my family's reactions, just like I couldn't control their decisions. I could only control how I responded, and that was where my power lay. As the school year progressed, I found myself growing in ways I hadn't anticipated. I threw myself into my studies with a renewed sense of purpose, finally feeling like I belonged in the world I was creating for myself. I started to make plans for the future, setting goals that weren't tied to my family's expectations or anyone else's approval. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And as I learned to embrace my independence, I also began to see things more clearly with my family. The wounds we had inflicted on each other, whether intentional or not, had not completely healed. But they didn't have to. Not right away, anyway. Healing takes time. But I knew one thing for certain. I was on my own path now, and no matter where that path took me, it was mine to follow. The day I received the final confirmation for my second scholarship, an internship program that would help me gain real-world experience in my field, I sat back and thought about how far I'd come. From the girl who had been silenced in her own home to the woman who had carved out a future she could be proud of, every step had been worth it. I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. I was walking forward, one foot in front of the other, no longer holding my breath, hoping to be seen. This wasn't just my academic success. This was my life, and for the first time, I realized that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, least of all my parents. As summer approached, I found myself thinking about the upcoming break and whether I should visit home. Part of me wanted to go, to try and bridge the gap between the family I had left behind and the one I was now creating. But I wasn't ready, not yet. Instead, I decided to spend the summer working at the internship I had secured. It was exactly what I had worked for, what I had fought for. And when I looked ahead, I saw nothing but possibility. I had learned so much in this journey, and in that moment, I understood that sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most rewarding outcomes. The scholarship wasn't just a financial lifeline, it had been the catalyst for my freedom, freedom from my family's expectations, from their limitations. I had found my voice, my purpose, and a future I could build on my own terms. And as I prepared to leave for the summer internship, I realized that no matter what happened next, I was exactly where I needed to be, on my own path, standing tall, and finally at peace with the journey I had taken. The summer internship turned out to be everything I had hoped for: challenging, eye-opening, and incredibly rewarding. I was learning from the best in my field, gaining real-world experience that made my college studies feel like they were finally clicking into place. It was everything I had worked for, everything I had dreamed of, and it was finally starting to feel like I belonged in this world. But even as I immersed myself in the work I was passionate about, there was still a lingering thought in the back of my mind. What about my family? The letter I had sent to my parents, the quiet words of understanding I had shared with them, had opened a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. They had apologized, and I had forgiven them, but deep down, I knew that we weren't done. We couldn't be. Our relationship had been too fractured for so long for me to think that a single letter could fix it all. I hadn't spoken to them since then, and I had no idea what to expect when I eventually did. I had created my own life, one that didn't revolve around their expectations, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to open up that door again. I had my dreams, my career, and I had learned to make myself proud without their approval. But there was still a part of me that wondered if we could ever truly heal. And then came the invitation. It arrived at the beginning of summer, tucked neatly between the bills and letters from the university. It was from my mother, in her familiar handwriting, and my heart skipped a beat as I tore open the envelope. Inside, there was a simple card. Maya, we've missed you. We know we've made mistakes, and we don't expect things to be perfect, but we want to try. Come home, even if just for a weekend. It would mean a lot to us. Love, Mom and Dad. The words were soft, tentative, but there was a warmth in them that I hadn't expected. They were reaching out, not as parents trying to fix everything, but as two people who had finally understood that their daughter wasn't a project, wasn't someone they could control. I sat there for a moment, the card in my hands, and thought about everything I had been through, everything I had fought for, and wondered if it was time to take the next step. The weekend came and I found myself driving back to the small town I had left behind months ago. I was nervous, but not in the way I had expected. I wasn't worried about my parents rejecting me again. This wasn't about them proving anything to me. It was about me proving to myself that I had the power to decide how my family would fit into my life moving forward. When I arrived at their house, the familiar sight of it tugged at my heartstrings. The house that had once felt like a place of restriction now felt like a place I could go to reclaim the parts of me I had left behind. I stood at the door for a moment, taking a deep breath before knocking. The door opened, and there they were, my parents standing in front of me, waiting. They didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. The years of tension between us hung in the air like a thick fog, but the warmth in their eyes made it clear that they were ready to try. Maya, my mother said softly, her voice shaking slightly. I'm so glad you came. I smiled, feeling something shift inside me. I'm glad to be here. We stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other, before my father stepped forward and hugged me. The gesture was unexpected, but it felt right. No words were needed. I realized that this moment, this small step toward healing, was all I needed. We didn't have to fix everything at once. We just had to try. That weekend was quiet, full of small conversations and shared meals, but it was also filled with something more. It was the feeling of starting over, not as the family I had known before, but as the family we were learning to be. We spoke about the past, about how they had made me feel invisible and unimportant, and how over time I had learned to survive without their support. But we also spoke about forgiveness, real forgiveness, the kind that came from acknowledging the hurt without trying to erase it. By the end of the weekend, I felt a shift in my heart. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't an instant reconciliation, but it was the beginning of something new. My parents had finally seen me for who I was, not as a daughter who would follow their blueprint, but as someone who had made their own way, someone who had fought for their future. Before I left, my mother pulled me aside. "Maya, I want you to know something," she said, her voice sincere. "I may not have been the mother you needed when you were younger, but I see you now. I see the woman you've become, and I'm proud of you, more than you'll ever know." Those words, those simple words, were all I needed. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need them to fix everything. But hearing them finally recognize my journey, my struggle, and my strength meant the world to me. As I drove away from their house, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I wasn't carrying the anger anymore. I wasn't holding on to the resentment that had weighed me down for so long. I had built my life, my career, my education, my future, on my own terms. I was no longer waiting for their approval or for them to validate my choices. I had learned to trust myself. I had learned to believe in my own worth. And that was enough. This was my journey, and it was mine to control. And no matter where it took me, I knew that I was ready. Ready for whatever came next. Ready to face my past with open arms, and ready to embrace the future I had worked so hard to build. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. In the weeks that followed, I felt a newfound sense of peace. I kept in touch with my parents, visiting them on occasion, but the relationship was different now. It was healthier, more balanced. I no longer felt like I had to prove myself. They were part of my life, but they no longer defined my worth. The scholarship I had earned was more than just financial aid. It had been the key to my freedom, my independence, and my ability to reclaim my own path. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the belief in myself that came with it. And as I sat in my college dorm, surrounded by books and plans for my future, I knew that this was just the beginning. My past had shaped me, but it no longer held me back. I was free, and that was more than enough. As the years went by, I found myself embracing the future I had worked so hard to create. College life was everything I had imagined and more. I was excelling in my studies, making lasting friendships, and diving into experiences that shaped my future career. I had become the woman I had always dreamed of being, confident, independent, and free from the chains of the past. The distance between me and my family had remained, but it no longer felt heavy. We had found a new rhythm in our relationship, one based on mutual respect and understanding. My parents, though still adjusting, began to see me in a different light. It wasn't easy for them, but I had learned that healing doesn't happen overnight. As for Ethan, I had long stopped allowing his wedding or my parents' favoritism to define me. I had moved on from that, and he had started his own life, far removed from the petty rivalries we once had. Occasionally, we'd exchange texts, but I no longer felt the need to prove myself to him or anyone else. The scholarship that had started it all became a symbol of my independence. It wasn't just a financial lifeline, it was a reminder that I could accomplish anything I set my mind to. It had given me the opportunity to rewrite my story, to step into a life I had built with my own hands. And on graduation day, as I stood there, diploma in hand, I looked out over the crowd. My parents were there, sitting together, quiet, watching me as I crossed the stage. There were no grand apologies or declarations of their pride, but I didn't need that anymore. The applause, the acknowledgement, it was all for me. I had done this for myself. I had taken control of my story, and in the end, that was all that mattered.